Super, thank you. Hello and good afternoon, everyone. My name is Roy Magara. I'm an employment solicitor with Magara Law, and today I'm joined by Paul Warriner, who will introduce himself in a moment. And today we're going to be talking about how to get the recognition you deserve. So the principle about all of this is we've all been in situations, or we may know of people who've been in situations who are looking to move up in their company. And you may want to get some hints and tips as to how you do that. Or you may be in a position where you've been trying to move up, but for some reason you can't. Some people fall into those two camps. The other part of this webinar is going to be talking about and giving people hints and tips in terms of your exit. If you're looking to exit and you want to try and negotiate some kind of package, what are the sorts of things you need to be thinking about? That's what I'll be talking about from an employment law point of view. And Paul will be focusing on the sorts of things that you can take away from your company to build bridges and be better at wherever you're going to be going to next. So I know a few people here have recently moved jobs or looking to be promoted, or indeed are in a mentorship kind of position. So hopefully this will be really worthwhile for all of you in the whole stream of where you're at today. If you've got questions, please feel free to put them in the chat, but nonetheless, there'll also be time at the end. And I think also just remember it's being recorded. And without further ado, I will pass on to Paul to introduce himself. Paul will be making sure everything in Zoom goes well. Paul, there may be some people who come in midway through who you'll need to admit, but I'll trust you with that. I'm in control of the slides. So Paul, over to you.
Thanks, Roy. And as you were saying that, there were two people waiting, and I was trying to multitask, which is obviously not a skill that I'm particularly good at. So I'll go straight in with the introduction. I'm Paul Warriner, the recognition coach, and I help individuals get the recognition they deserve, or companies put in the recognition that they need to have in place to support employees. So the first slide, Roy, if you just click through as you're driving today. So the first slide here is just to introduce the topic, really, and recognition comes from the Latin verb, and here's the pronunciation, recognoscere, to know again and to call to mind. But that's where it comes from. But what's really important is what does it mean to you as individuals? What does it mean to the individual in the workplace? What does it mean to the company? What does it mean to you guys in the audience today? And I think if you take nothing else away from this webinar, but this one thing, understanding what it really means to you, because it means something different to everybody. What rewards me does not necessarily reward you, whether that's a remuneration in financial terms or anything else. And it can be quite simple, but it does take a little bit of thought to sort of think about that and just see where and how you would like to be recognized. So some of the benefits, Roy, if you would click the next slide, please. Some of the benefits of recognition. This first part of my presentation is about setting the scene around recognition. It's a well-used word, well understood probably, but it has a magical flavor to it, which I want to try and bring out in this first part of the presentation and set the scene. It certainly makes the employees feel valued. Us as individuals feel valued. And while I'm talking, I'm admitting, which is, I'm just amazed already. Employees feel better connected if they're recognized, both with colleagues, teams, managers, leaders, companies, within the company itself, with their communities that they're involved with, whether that's within the workplace or the extended workplace, or indeed their residential areas. And that's one thing about recognition that transcends the workplace. Indeed, whatever you might learn from today, whatever you might investigate in the future around recognition, it doesn't just apply within the workplace. It applies within your home, with your family, with your friends, with the communities that you interact with. And you get a better sense of belonging if people recognize your contribution. You have a feeling of empowerment. And I know from personal experience, if I feel recognized, whatever that means to me as an individual, but if I feel recognized and appreciated, guess what? I'll probably contribute more. I'll probably try a little bit harder. What does that do? Well, it raises my self-esteem, and there's a shortage of that around the world, for sure. And in the workplace, it improves your attendance and reduces a thing called presenteeism, which I'm sure you know, but it's when I'm sat at this computer and I'm here physically, but I'm not actually engaged in anything going on around me. But of course, the whole workplace has been turned upside down recently, so we can explore that in some Q&A maybe afterwards. But if I'm doing more and I'm more excited about doing more, then I'm going to be more productive, probably, if I'm doing the right things, of course. And overall, recognition in the workplace increases the respect and compassion within that workplace. And it's a soulless place and a demoralizing place without any recognition at all. I think you'll all agree with that one. So apologies for all the pace. We've got to get through this setting of the scene. Roy, the next slide, please. But who's responsible for recognition? Well, I'm bearer of bad news here. We all are. And that means us as individuals, whether employees or family members, but as an individual, we're responsible for our own recognition. But teams are also responsible. Managers are responsible. Leaders, companies, communities. Everybody carries the can with this thing called recognition. But I firmly believe that if we're not getting recognition where we are, we can do something about it. It's not somebody else's problem. It starts with me. I need to take ownership of this particular thing called recognition. And how do I improve that situation? So who's responsible? We all are. Roy, next slide, please. Okay, so when I was working more than 10 years or so ago, I was working with an organization, international organization. I was doing some training, management training, new employees all the way up to board level directors, etc. And I realized there's a common theme running throughout the organization that people weren't feeling the love. There was nobody smiling consistently. And it was just a little bit of an unhappy place to start with. But this was consistent through the starters, the new people, the people who've been there for a while. There just seemed to be a void in this work life thing that they've got going. Now I started to think about this, and I came up with the idea that there's plenty of books on management and there's plenty of books on leadership, but there was no information, no resource that sort of led to how to be a good employee. So 10 years ago plus, in 2008, I started to conceive an idea about how to be a good employee. And then in 2018, lo and behold, a little book pops up, came out of my brain somehow. And I published a book called The Recognition Book. It morphed from being a good employee into how to get recognition within the workplace and beyond. And that spawned a lot of different ideas and around coaching, around career coaching, about the work I was doing at the time. So that's how the book came about, which really responded to a need I thought was in the workplace about individuals feeling the love within the workplace, recognition, appreciation, whatever the word is that you associates best with you and what you are looking for. And one of the things that came out of that process was something called a recognition plan, which I'm going to call the recognition plan because it was like a little idea that a tool I developed, but it is nothing more than a goal sheet. But it's a structured goal sheet that I use to help clients give themselves a little bit of a roadmap for the future. What are they going to work for? What are they trying to achieve? How are they trying to achieve it? What are their plans? What does success look like, etc., within the workplace? So this recognition plan became the backbone of some of the help I was able to give to people within this particular sphere of recognition. And it's incredibly broad, I'm sure you'll agree. Roy, the next slide, please, sir. We probably all have read these statistics and know something about goal setting. It's a simple but very effective tool. As you can see from the slide, those people that write their goals down, put actions in place, share them, and have a plan to sort of progress it, do an awful lot better than those that don't. So my idea of a recognition plan is nothing more than a morphed goal setting program, but it has some immediacy about it. It has some real tangible sort of pull and push in the workplace, in the moment, every single day, every single week, every single month. You're able to think about the reason you go to work and the recognition you're getting in return for that contribution that you're making. So really the principle of where are you now? Where do you want to be? And what are you going to do about it? Simple as that. So Roy, the next slide, please. I make no apologies for racing through this stuff. It's setting the context for the discussion later. So if there are any questions that come out of this particular thing, then please ask at the end or fire away in the chat. But we can use these tools and this recognition motivation for lots of different things. Obviously, career planning. We're going to talk about 3 particular phases going forward in this webinar about starting in a new job, when you're in the middle of a job, and when you're exiting a job. But at any stage, at whatever level, you can start to think about your future, your contribution, your reward for that contribution in response to, with recognition about career planning, about how you move through an organization, what path you take through an organization, because it may not be, a promotion. It may be just a different tributary, it's easy for me to say, isn't it? That you may be taking in an organization to sort of further your experience. But the recognition you receive will affect the choices that you want to make about where you go and who you work for even. And certainly, hopefully you'll agree, the amount of recognition that you receive in this context in the workplace is often linked very heavily to your job satisfaction. And one of the things we're talking about later on is leaving an organization, going to another organization, whether that's through choice or it's through a blockage of some description, for example. But your mobility is also affected by the amount of recognition you're receiving. And I also say it's a two-sided coin, the amount of recognition you're giving. I just want to throw that little spanner in the works there. It's not all about me. It's all about giving too. But that's a wider topic we can talk about. Without a doubt, if I'm feeling loved and appreciated in the workplace, my confidence is rising. My self-esteem is rising. If my confidence is rising, I'm pushed to take on new tasks, new experiences, new challenges. I'm going to grow. So confidence is strongly linked to recognition, as is influence. If I'm confident, I'm feeling appreciated in the workplace, I'm going to have more influence. I want to, exercise that influence muscle so I can develop teams. I can develop a direction for an organization, whatever it's going to be. And a very topical subject right now at this moment in time, having come through a pandemic or coming through a pandemic, is well-being. There's a lot of research out there that says that recognition is linked to our state of mind and the stress that we feel or don't feel, or how we handle that stress, whether if it's in the workplace or it's at home, whatever it's going to be. Our well-being is affected by the amount that we are appreciated, loved, recognized, whatever the word is that you want to wrap around this particular experience. If we are well recognized, appreciated in the way that we want to be, then our well-being will stand a better chance of being where it needs to be. And on that note, I think that tees up Roy almost perfectly.
Thank you kindly, Paul, for that. And in this next 10-minute session, we're going to be looking at, as hopefully everyone can see on the screen now, so there's some 5 potential reasons as to why you aren't getting anywhere. So yes, part of this talk is all about the positive ways, productive ways we can get to where we all want to be. But equally, there may be some reasons why you aren't getting there in the first place. And the first thing that I wanted to talk about with everyone today is about favoritism or nepotism. I will touch on each one separately in just a moment. So favoritism is exactly as it says on the tin. Someone doesn't like you, even though you are doing a great job. It's for some reason outside your job performance. It's for some reason outside your ability. For instance, you can have a manager who consistently offers some other person who isn't committed to the projects, who isn't doing as well as you even statistically, and yet they're the person who is given the high regarded projects or the high regarded tasks. That unfortunately is very common. And from a promotion sense of view, that equally can be the case. Nepotism is a little bit different than favoritism, although the principle still applies. And that's just simply where the favor is shown to a family member. And in a work situation, it is more often the case that family members are hired and they move up the ranks quite much more quicker than someone else who isn't a family member. Out of interest here, feel free to put this in the chat put this in the chat. Who of you here has witnessed or been a victim of favoritism or nepotism? I'll be interested to know, just for a few of you, who's been in that situation. Feel free either to raise your hand in Zoom or just put a yes or something along those lines in the chat, please. Yeah, a number of hands being raised here. Yeah, indeed. Thank you, everyone who's taken part. Unfortunately, it's quite common. In fact, there was a survey by CBS News a short while ago where it said there's about 56% of bosses already have a favorite in mind when considering a promotion, which we'll call a promotion. That's quite high, 56%. And around 75%, I think it was, of the respondents had said that they've witnessed favoritism, and that seems to concur with the people here who are putting this on. One person said that he hasn't seen favoritism. That's really good to hear you've had that experience, and I hope that becomes much more of a common trend. Someone's mentioned, I've seen people who are drinking buddies being promoted sooner than others. Really, really good point, and coincidentally, I'll be touching on that in a short while. Thank you everyone for your contributions there in all those shapes and forms. So the reality is, as some of us have either experienced or witnessed ourselves, favoritism and nepotism will only lead to lower morale, resentment, desertion, stunted growth. The list goes on. The next one, which someone mentioned about drinking buddies, etc., goes into my next point. If you have incompatible interests than other people or than your managers. So the reality is, it's not just about things from an unconscious bias point of view, whether it's talking about things like sports or religion or family status, say. Management may also see the job extending into social activities as well. So some people here have already spoken about, you maybe have been in a situation where there may be a culture of get-togethers or drinking after work or whatever kind of ritualistic activity might happen in that sense. And you may have found yourself and you aren't in that category of people who may not necessarily enjoy or partake in that culture or activity, a sort of lower status in the company. Well, again, that's another potential reason as to why you may not be able to progress or be promoted within your company. And the next one we've got here is that if someone doesn't like you because of a protected characteristic, so what on earth is a protected characteristic to begin with? Well, under a particular piece of law called the Equality Act 2010, that's simply where someone discriminates against you. And some examples are things like your age or race, religion, marital status, for example, disability or lack of disability. Discrimination is rarely blatant. It's rare that someone just comes up to someone and says, well, you so-and-so, or whatever the case may be. But the unfortunate reality is personal preferences in this sort of dark way, for want of a better phrase, do have an effect on promotions and can have an effect on you. The potential victim, unfortunately, does then have to do extra homework in a sense, because an investigation, because it isn't that blatant, isn't that straightforward. Sometimes it's just that niggling hint that, hang on, how come it seems like a number of my clients have said to me, it seems to me lots of the guys are getting promoted, but I'm the only woman in my team and I haven't been promoted. Or it seems to me that all these people, I had a case a while ago now, where there was a certain racial group of people, all who it eventually turned out were being paid less than another group of people, another race of people. That was quite underhand by the company, but unfortunately these things do go on. Unfortunately, most companies aren't as aren't that brazen to do such a thing. Next is you may be a threat to your boss. I'll be interested to know again if any of you have been or have witnessed this kind of scenario where either you or anyone else you know of may have been perceived by management or what have you to have been a threat. Again, thumbs up or hands up or comments in the chat room. I'll be really interested to know. I've had to deal with clients who've been in this kind of predicament, somewhat ironically, as an employment lawyer. Even I too have been a victim of this. And the reality is, I bet there are people who will watch this later on or who are listening to this now, and you'll be nodding in agreement because of your experiences, or you witnessed someone else go through this. The reality is that it's unfortunate that there are people in your department or in departments you've been in who management will see are more competent than them or what have you, but will willfully oversee them for projects, for promotions. And that simply is because they're threatened by you. And this can happen from time to time. Thank you. People are saying, for example, either yes or yeah, gaining qualifications above boss's level. Yeah, that's certainly a key one. Witness your friend being bullied by the manager, indeed, or indeed being bullied or harassed yourself. The reality is, it's not just, sometimes it's just that feeling or that thought process of, hang on, every time we're in this team meeting, this person speaks to me, they're really coming at me for no reason, or they're speaking to me in a particular tone, or they're treating me differently, or this person made a mistake and it was very much a kind of whatever affair. But when I did something wrong, they didn't cut me any slack. You might be micromanaged to the point that you end up second guessing yourself every single time. These things are unfortunate realities of things that happen in companies and things which we all need to be alive to, because unfortunately it's much more common than we think. Someone else has said at a job interview, I was obviously more experienced than my interviewer. Yeah, for sure, it happens. I'll be interested to know what happened as a result of that particular interview in your own experiences, please, if you're happy to share that with us, please. And the last point I'm going to touch on before I pass on back to Paul is another potential reason why you may not be being promoted is if you're underperforming for reasons which are not necessarily your fault. The person has just said didn't get the job offer. That I laugh, not because it's funny, but because it's just something I hear all the time. I'm sorry you've been in that predicament, but hopefully you've shown them that there are other people who value you much more, and rightly so. So moving on to this point about you yourself are now underperforming for reasons which are directly not your fault. So by this I speak twofold. The first is in the context of a disability. So I have a number of clients, say, who come to me with cases like, for example, dyslexia or some other sort of similar condition that will require reasonable adjustments. And for some people, it's particular paper or something over the screen, or just simply more time to do the work, lesser workload, the list goes on. And then they make these requests, the employer doesn't follow through. Oh, and by the way, just to make it clear, it's not just if you yourself have got the particular disability in this context, it's if you know someone who does have a disability, say it's a family member, and you, because of that, might need more time or anything else in between because you're trying to manage that yourself in your workplace. Then your employer doesn't help you, and then as a result of that, on the face of it, your work suffers because of that, and then your employer ends up blaming you. I see that time and time again, and that's not right. And the second scenario is where the employee isn't given enough time to work on a particular project, say, for example, or they're not given enough work to meet a target, and then they're reprimanded because of that. And I've had 2 instances of 2 clients who've been in that predicament in the last month, where there's been new management come in, targets have been given way over and above what they're used to or what's even reasonable. Unsurprisingly, didn't hit their targets, and then they were dismissed. It happens far too often, unfortunately, but these are some reasons. And if you find yourself in that predicament, feel free to get in touch, because it'll be an interesting conversation to have and see if I can help you. But I'm going to pause there for now. And in more positive news, I'm going to pass on back to Paul. Paul, over to you.
Thanks, Roy. Positive, that's interesting. Okay, I'll try and uplift it. But listening to what you were saying there, Roy, every single one of those instances that you're talking about, whether of discrimination or, more qualified than your boss, or, there's favoritism, nepotism, and those things, every single one of those barriers or points or challenges represents an opportunity for the individual to do something to raise the recognition levels for themselves and for their team. If you're just starting a business, you don't know any of this history and the culture that's going on within the organization. So you've got to adjust and adapt and learn and accelerate your growth within your appreciation of what's going on in the business, and your reading of the situation, both the informal and the formal channels of communication. You've got to accelerate that as quickly as you possibly can to get off to the best possible start you can. And how do you do that? I would say very few people approach a new job with a plan of what they're going to do on a day-to-day basis. Very few people go to work with a purpose. They go to work because that's what they're doing and that's how they get remunerated. Very few people actually have a purposeful plan every single day to approach with a specific task. That sounds very draconian and very formulaic, but if you have a plan to explore and you have a plan to progress and to get close to and communicate with, and watch the styles of your bosses, your managers, your colleagues, and other people in other departments, read the situations. If you do this kind of stuff, and you consciously do it, you will accelerate your progress for sure. But if you're starting a new job, what do you? You're bound through the doors, you're enthusiastic. That's number one. I'm just going to refer to some of the items within the particular book. Now, this isn't a promo by any means. It's just a good reference Bible for me. But if I was starting a new job, what would I like to do? What would I like to see? I'd like to be enthusiastic. For sure, you're going to be enthusiastic. The trick is, how do you maintain your enthusiasm through the years? Well, through the weeks, through your probation, through the years. How do you maintain that? You need to have an idea of how you're going to do that. What does that look like to you? What really excites you? What gets your juices flowing when you get into work? And just by asking that question, if the answer is nothing, you may not be in the right job. It's good to know you're not in the right job as much as it is good to know that you've landed in the perfect place for the rest of your life. So key things that I would recommend is maintaining that enthusiasm, obviously having a plan to do that. And one of my favorite words of all time is curiosity. be curious, forever curious. You get an induction course, you go and you learn about different departments. Continue that process. Every day should be a school day. You should be learning everything, and to, be inquisitive about how the business grows. When I first started working way back when, and I worked for a large bank, that's all I knew. It was a large bank. But you can go out today, you can find information about how long the business has been going, what their target audience is, what their products are. You might be working in accounts. And if you're working in accounts, you may not see the clients. You may just be processing paperwork for order forms and invoices. But you can know something about the organization, and you can develop interests within that organization. You may find out, and this is one of the tributaries that come off from recognition, that what the organization really doesn't marry up with your beliefs and the way you think the world should be. But if it does, that's fantastic, because you then have a hook to hang things on. You can sort of get behind the organization and be more involved, and then be creative. I mean, creative is one of those things. If you're starting a new job, it's very difficult to articulate. You don't want to be seen to be too too enthusiastic, or I'd say too enthusiastic, but the one that's trying all these new ideas. Oh, we tried that in 1972. It didn't work then. It's never going to work now. But when you're being creative, it's how you channel that creativity, or channel that curiosity, or channel that enthusiasm that's going to get you noticed. Not very many people think this one through at all. They just go at it. And I've got 4 sons, all went to university, came out of university, and I don't think any of them had any idea what the workplace was about. Not one of them had any instruction of what it was going to be like the minute they turned up into an office environment or a work environment. The education system doesn't seem to prepare us very well for that. So where are those resources? Well, it's in either coaches or career coaches, colleagues, parents, authority figures, etc. But we need to go out looking for it. We need to have that responsibility. So when you're starting a new job, 3 key things: curiosity, enthusiasm, and creativity. But more importantly, how you channel those 3 characteristics into getting a plan forward and how you move forward. Second part of this is when you're in a job and you seem to be going nowhere, as Roy has indicated several times, there may be reasons that are stopping you moving forward. What do you do about it? How do you regroup? How do you pull back from the brink and sort of say, yeah, I like the business. I kind of like my job, but I'm just going nowhere. I just don't know what to do next. There's nobody to talk to. I talk to my mates down the pub, or we used to be able to talk to our mates down the pub. I don't, hopefully we can continue to do that shortly. And they say this, then they say that. Well, I don't want to do all that. I don't really, it's the hassle of moving jobs and stuff like that. Nobody has a particular place to go necessarily where they can discuss this freely without fear of being judged or putting things at risk. So it's important you do your homework, have a plan. What am I going to do, and how am I going to progress? Am I listening to my colleagues? Am I mentoring my colleagues? Because that's one of the best ways to progress, to get recognized, is to mentor and to teach. What have I learned over the years that I've been doing this accounts job, or this sales job, or this front of house job, or this engineering job, or this line management job? What have I learned? How can I teach those skills? If the more you give, the more you get. And it's that same. If you want respect, you give respect. If you want recognition, you give recognition. And giving recognition to other people is one surefire way of starting to receive it back. But people don't necessarily think like this when they're in the middle of the battle. And sometimes it's better to sort of step back, take a good view of what's going on, and watch and learn. Do you Do you hold meetings? Do you take charge? Do you step forward? Do you volunteer? I'll run this meeting. And then do you research how to run that meeting so effectively? People go, wow, we're out of this meeting on time. That's amazing. It's never happened before. How did you do that? I just followed these simple guidelines of how to run a meeting. And they're all over Google. The information is so much more readily available now of how to do things. But can we be bothered? If we can't be bothered, where's our motivation? What's the motivation coming from? Lack of a plan. You've heard it all before. Planning to fail. No, it's the whatever the phrase is. If I don't have a plan, I'm going to fail. So that's if you're stuck in the heart of it. There are other things here, for example, getting more qualifications. We just met, Roy was mentioning. Becoming more qualified puts you in a better position to be able to view your choices going forward, opens up new doors. People often stop once they've come out of university or from school and say, that's it, my exams are done. If you're learning, you're going to increase your earning. And that's what happens. The better qualified you are, the more chance you have of being able to respond to the opportunities that come. And if they're not coming, what we've got to try and do is build the confidence for you to be able to tackle that situation that Roy mentioned in the earlier discussion of identifying the blockages and how do I address those. A lot of this recognition is sometimes, how do I communicate my feelings? How am I communicating my position? How am I able to understand the blockages? And what's the thinking I need to do to be able to move around? What's the workaround? So there's a few things there. When I'm stuck in this particular role, where do I go to get help? It can, and often does, simply come down to, do I have a plan? If I don't have a plan, what am I doing? I'm just going to work, being present, picking up a paycheck, and I'm just being paid enough to do the job and not what I think I should be worth, because I have so much more to give, but nobody values me. Nobody values me, so what do? I start to shut down and I just do enough to get by. There's a cycle there that I'm sure a lot of people have witnessed. But Roy raised a few good issues in the previous discussion. Every single one of those issues is an opportunity to get recognized in my world. Now, I'm not sure for time, but quickly on leaving a job, just setting the scene for the last slide. When all of my efforts have failed, I've had a plan, it didn't come to fruition. That doesn't mean to say I give up with my life. I may have made a conscious choice that this organization I'm currently working for isn't the right one. It doesn't marry up with my beliefs or my view of the world, my internal beliefs. So I'm going to go look for another position. I have a huge wealth of experience that I can carry forward. Or I have just disappointment, disillusionment, and absolute hatred, strong word, for the organization I just left. Most people don't leave an organization, by the way. Most people leave the manager they're working for. The organization was fine, but they just didn't get on with their manager. If they didn't get on with their manager, why? What did I learn from that process? How can I change that? How could I have changed it? How could I have been different? How do I assume that responsibility of being in charge of my own life and my own destiny? How can I improve that situation? And so when you're leaving an organization, there's your own exit interview with yourself is more powerful than the company's exit interview with you when you leave. And if you carry the good and the bad, but take note from the good and how can you deploy that going forward, you have a much stronger base to build from. And that's not just about getting more money, and it's not just about, getting new opportunities. It's about taking advantage of those opportunities to help you progress through your life. So much to talk about, limited for time. And on this particular note, I just want to say, hello, Steve. It's good to see you.
Hello, Paul. How are you doing?
I'm doing very well. Sorry, everybody, I had a little note in the chat. So long to see you after such a long time. Who is this? I said. So there's an element of recognition. I didn't recognize him. He looks completely different. So young.
And yourself.
Well, on that note, about leaving and setting the scene for the new one, the new job that you might have, a new opportunity, and having all those reference points that you can bring forward and carry forward, I'm going to tee it up for Roy.
Thank you kindly. All right, so for this last section, before we go into questions and comments, we're just going to be looking at some 5 considerations when negotiating your exit package. So sometimes it is not necessarily a matter of just handing in your notice and leaving. For some of the reasons we've been talking about in today's webinar, you may be able to get some kind of exit package or settlement agreement to carry forward into your next role. So what does that all look like? Well, typically a settlement agreement is a document which codifies the terms of your termination of your employment and you leaving. The first thing before you start diving into something like that, or before you start trying to negotiate the sorts of sums and figures, etc., with your employer, is understanding what your priorities are. If your priorities are to leave as soon as possible, you may not necessarily want to work your notice period. If that's the case, you may have some kind of contractual provision in your employment contract, which allows you to receive a payment in lieu of notice. So you're able to finish sooner and then of course go somewhere else sooner, or indeed you may be able to negotiate that either way. We'll have a discussion about these other key components in a short while. Well, like any negotiation, you'll have a better idea of where you stand once you have a better idea of what sort of outcome you want. So that does incorporate something which Paul was talking about there in terms of having a plan. I appreciate in Paul's context, he was talking about that recognition plan, but in this sense, it's still important for you to plan where you want to be and where you want to go after you leave. So you'll want to keep these sorts of ideas in mind as you journey through this next section, because the next thing you'll need to understand, at least in basic part, are some of the key components of what that severance package would look like. For example, it's not just about your notice pay or your notice period that I talked about earlier. Depending on why you're leaving and the circumstances around that, it may be the case that you should be getting some kind of compensation package, some kind of ex gratia payment. What is that? How much should that be? It might be the case that there are some benefits which you still ought to be receiving throughout a certain period of time. It might be the case that you should be getting your pension during a certain period of time still paid for as well, even after you've left, and there's some ways to get around that. Confidentiality might be important to you, given some of the reasons you leave, a reference and some kind of agreed announcement. All these things are really important by way of basic components. Next, in terms of your discussions with your employer, leverage your success. If you've been working hard there, you've got an exemplary record, there are reasons why you ought to be receiving something more than just the average. Leverage that with your employer. You have every right to do just that. So again, that's something which you ought to keep in mind. Next, always wait and take legal advice before you sign any kind of paperwork. For what it's worth, if you're getting a settlement agreement, you have no choice but to get independent legal advice. But I think many people think that it's just a simple matter of, oh, just get someone to sign it and that's that. Every single client who tells me that, it seems to be the case that theirs are the trickiest. There's actually something else that needs to be done. In fact, I had a client recently who came to me and the sum that was offered in terms of what that person ought to have received was £25,000 apart. £25,000 apart. The company was offering, I can't really disclose figures, was offering a certain sum, which was £25,000 lower than what she actually got in the end. That's an incredible amount of money. So it's always worth, there's always much value in getting a legal opinion in terms of whatever it is you're going to be signing. And lastly, leverage your rights. So we've been talking a short while ago about some of the things that might lead up to you having to end up in this scenario of you leaving and negotiating an exit package. If you're going to be leveraging your rights, what I mean is, say, for example, if it's been because of some kind of favoritism, bullying and harassment, discrimination, the list goes on. These are some of the things that you could be highlighting to your employer as to why actually you ought to be receiving more as part of that compensation package. So those are some hints and tips there in terms of things you ought to be thinking about. Hopefully they've been of some use to you or people you know, or indeed they might come into some kind of use in the future. For now, we're going to pause on us speaking for a short moment, and we're going to hand over to all of you in terms of your questions and comments. If you've got something to say, feel free to either just unmute yourself and ask a question. I appreciate some of you are saying you've got to go. Lovely to see those of you who've been there, but you've got to dash, absolutely fine. Paul, I'll start off please with a couple of questions. One person had asked, starting a new role in lockdown has made it harder to gauge the culture and politics of a company while working from home. What advice do you have regarding this on how to be recognized?
The world changed significantly last year. You know, recognition is often perceived as around the workplace. I can influence things because I'm around people. The proximity is you can observe things a lot easier. So when people started working remotely, it took away that interaction in the workplace. But all that Zoom is doing, if you look at it in the counterintuitive way, is holding a microscope to everything that you do. You're now on camera 24/7 almost if you're in the business environment, on Zoom, email and stuff like that. The basics still apply. So if you've joined an organization, getting to know the team, you still have to do the hard yards. And those hard yards are not in person now, walking across the corridor or grabbing a coffee in the canteen or popping across to a coffee shop and sitting down and nattering. You have to do those hard yards on the platforms that you have available, whether that's, you know, Zoom, Teams, and often all the alternatives and that sort of thing. You still have to do those basic stuff of connecting. And the best way you can do that, whatever the way the company provides it. But if you just hide behind your computer screen, get on with your job and just fire out emails and receive emails and just expect things to have progressed and your career to have moved to a new level, you're probably going to fall short. Why? We still have to do the hard yards. We just have to be a bit more creative about how we do it. Are you organizing chat rooms? Are you organizing those meetings? Are you in control of the Zoom? Are you driving the slides? Have you put the slides together? Have you volunteered? Have you connected with another department, which is so much easier, by the way? You can have more meetings than you can shake a stick at. How you control those meetings from a well-being point of view is a different matter, but Zoom has allowed people to be much more accessible than they would have been under other circumstances. How do you see the cracks in this situation and prise them open to your benefit? Often comes back down to thinking about it, being on purpose every single day, every single meeting, observing what's going on, reading between the lines or between the boxes of the Zoom call. So just do the basics, keep pushing and finding new ways of connecting.
Can I give you some real life examples of how I conduct my life? I've been doing remote video for many years now. I engage with many different customers day in, day out, people I've never seen before, all across Europe, in fact, across the world. Having that way, all this stuff behind me gives an insight to the people I'm talking to. So it raises questions. So it's not always about work, it's about interacting with those people on a social level. So they'll ask questions. What do I do? Why is it all there? And I found a few other people have taken the hint and do that, because that helps open up conversations, because we're talking to people, we're not just talking work all the time. Just in the post this morning, talking about recognition, this is what came in the post.
Great job.
It's a handwritten letter. It's so rare to have a handwritten letter these days, but that boosts one's confidence. And I think that was very nice of that organization. I don't do any business with them, but they're just thanking me for what I did with them. And I think the whole video experience has become so important to us now. And when you have the cats walking across your keyboard in front of the camera, or the dogs or the children. You just got to live with that and accept it is part of life today. My case, it's helicopters flying over usually, which can be a little bit irritating, but
That's fantastic. Outstanding, I should say, Steve. Thank you so much for your contributions and really good points there.
I think also when what Steve was talking about there is a format of connecting, throwing yourself into Zoom in the same way you would throw yourself into a meeting in a coffee shop. It doesn't depersonalize things. In fact, some of the humanizing things that Steve's talking about, cats walking across keyboards, Marshall amps in the background, have reminded me of his musical background. I will ask questions, and if I don't pay attention to this, so I'm missing opportunities. But people don't do Zoom on purpose generally. People approach Zoom as a means to an end. It's an opportunity to show your interests, your background, or your professionalism, or whatever it can be. You know, some people don't take those opportunities, others do, and they progress.
Thank you both. Anyone else got any comments or questions, etc.?
Observations, some great points have been made by both of you, and thank you for that. Very thought-provoking, by the way. But I have known some people in my team actually a few years ago who probably had an overinflated view of what they're doing and how they're going about work and so forth. And they'd sort of come to you and say, I'm a graduate, I should be on this salary by this age, and that's how they equated things. And that can be quite a difficult conversation. Obviously, you point out where they can improve, what they could do better, but it was that sort of slightly, and well, I think you mentioned favoritism and so forth. I think managers tend to recognise when people are doing that little bit extra and going, doing the hard yards, as Paul has just said. I think people have to put that effort in, do those hard yards, and they will get recognised by and large. It is a question of attitude some of the times, but not just an entitlement, and there is a difference.
I think that word you've just used there, Tim, was entitlement. There is a huge entitlement in certain generations that life owes me a living and life owes me a job. Just because I've got a degree, for example, I should be on X amount of salary. The reality is, you're probably aware, is there are lots of graduates out there who don't have work, and certainly have got work that is not what they were expecting when they signed up for the courses. But there's an equalization, you know, their experience in the workplace. As managers, we can influence that. We are possibly in a greater position to set them on the right track. They may not be the right employee for our organization, but if we take the time, and this is where recognition isn't just about me. It isn't just, that's how I've pitched it. It's about how I can get more recognition. But reality is, it's a giving thing. It's a fantastic, magical thing. If I can shape somebody's career by coaching them and enlightening them, or giving them some kind of experience that will lead them onto something else, and recognizing the skills that they do have, they may not be right for me, but they may be perfect for somebody else. And that'll come back and find its way back to me in some way, shape or form. And that in itself is a form of recognition. So we have a huge opportunity to influence the lives of others as business owners or senior managers or even colleagues, peers, etc., with the use of recognition.
Indeed. Thank you very much, both. Misbah, has you got your hand up? Would you like to unmute yourself and ask a question?
Hi, afternoon, everyone. Roy, Paul, thank you so much for putting this on. It's actually been really, really great. Very informative and just great, to be honest. My question was, and thank you both, my question was regarding recognition, and from more of a senior leadership kind of perspective, and even maybe lower down, if you have any kind of comments and thoughts. How is it that you think organizations could potentially recognize better from top down? And I know one might be, well, one that's been kind of discussed and does come up is salary. right? So like increasing salary. But given post-lockdown as well and the impact it's taking on businesses, that might not necessarily be possible, or people may deserve a salary increase, but it just may not make business sense. And I was just wondering, given your experiences, if there are any kind of suggestions or comments on how could we recognize better.
That one of the advantages of working with Roy is that it's incredibly complementary what Roy's skill sets are and this particular topic of recognition, much more so than I appreciated when we started talking about it. So from my experience, I don't think it's anything to do with money. And I think if you did a survey, people want to be well looked after and well rewarded, but it's not about the money. I think it's Napoleon said, men will die for ribbons. And that's actually, I believe that too. So you can reward people with and get more contribution. I'm not going to say effort, because a lot of people are really working hard, but they may be working hard at the wrong things. But you can get more contribution, more meaningful contribution from people with careful thought. So as a manager, how do I reward these people? How do I reward the team? And I have an example, from my previous life in sales, where people would get awarded bonuses and trips abroad for, targets that they'd hit. And the sales guy says, are you rewarding me with this holiday because I did well, or are you rewarding me because that's what you think I want? Because I don't want the holiday. Can I just have the money, please? So people's recognition isn't always about the holiday, the money. It could be about an opportunity. Can you give me the opportunity to go and work somewhere else? Can you give me the opportunity to be on that particular thing? So I think it takes as much effort to think about how to reward somebody and how to recognize their contribution as it is, I don't think that effort is put in. It's too generic. So top down, even as a senior vice president of a global organization, they will have their view of what recognition really means to them. And if you're on £250,000 a year, you probably don't want more money because you're going to pay too much tax. What you probably want is a little bit more flexibility about where and how you work, about the days and the holidays you can take, about schools, about moving, about working from home now. I mean, Apple are trying to force people to come back to their organization. The employees are kicking back. We don't want to. They've probably made more money in lockdown due to the various technology advances, and yet they're trying to bring people back into their environment that they believe is more creative. The employees think otherwise. I'm watching to see where that will end. Everybody at every level has their own view of recognition.
Super. Thank you very much for your thoughts, Paul, and thank you, Mr. for your question.
Thank
We've got
you.
a couple of minutes left, and there are 2 questions in the chat that I've noted, which I'll pick up on. So apologies, if anyone else has got any more questions, my details are on there, Paul's details are on there. Feel free to get in touch and we'll be really excited to continue the conversation as well. But it seems like 1 question is for you, Paul, and 1 question is for me. So I'll start with yours, Paul. So someone's asked, what about if you're an introvert? So connecting or going out your way, going out your way to get recognized is a little harder because it may mean going outside your comfort zone.
Fantastic question, because things that we might have said today have all been about putting yourself forward, projecting, all sorts of different things. But as an introvert, I think I come back. A lot of things revolve around your self-confidence, either in the job or in your situation, your relationships, lots of things. So they're all about confidence, and you can still be an introvert and still be confident. It's about finding that nice balance that says, I'm good at what I do. I just need to find a way of showcasing that to other people. And you don't have to stand on the stage and have flashing lights and, perform. You can, there's a lot of great effort and great reward to be had behind the scenes, and not be behind supporting other people. As an introvert, you could possibly be coaching, you could possibly be mentoring, you could possibly helping people in the office or in a digital format, doing things to move other people forward. And that's one of the beautiful benefits of being a coach. You get to see other people blossom and grow from the support and efforts that you put in. And I can't tell you how rewarding that is, to see that. And as an introvert, you could do that. You could find one person to champion and to support and push them forward and help them grow. That's incredibly rewarding and will be recognized.
Thank you for that, Paul. The second question, I've said it's probably more helpful if I answer it because it's to do with the vacation scheme in that sense, although I suppose the nature or the principle will still be applicable to everyone. So the question is how to get recognized during the recruitment stage, because congratulations, by the way, this person's got a vacation scheme coming up. Fantastic, well done. So I'll answer it from a legal sense. I'm an employment lawyer, so at least from my own experiences, the best tip that I can give in terms of being recognized or getting that kind of vacation scheme or training contract or whatever it is it's going to sound really odd, but be yourself and be genuinely interested in the other person. Be genuinely interested. It's amazing how many times people think the interview is all about them. So they'll talk and talk and talk and talk and talk all about them. But I've actually found the more I'm actually genuinely interested in, oh, hey, Steve, by the way, I see you've got your martial art behind you. What's that all about? Or when it gets to the end and you say, have you got any questions for us? Maybe don't ask how many years have you been doing corporate law and what excites you most about this area of law? Because quite frankly, most people won't really care that much about the law per se itself. But maybe ask them something in particular about themselves or perhaps a more personal question, because we've been talking a lot about usually the dark side about human nature, but one of the beautiful sides about human nature is finding things in common and finding commonality between one another. And if there are ways that you can connect with people past that kind of professional level into a more personal level, they will be able to affiliate themselves with you. And that affinity will give you a greater chance of becoming recognized. Not recognized about that person who's great at law, because the very fact you've been invited to that vacation scheme, to that interview, whatever it is because you're clearly great on paper. There's clearly something about you that's put you in front of these people. So you haven't necessarily got to start pointing out things on your CV all over again, but genuinely be yourself and be genuinely interested in the other person is, I would suggest, the best way to get recognized at that stage. Tim, just last point I'll mention before we close, is also helpfully highlighted in the chat if you haven't seen it already. Introducing a flexible benefit program can be good recognition as well. Can involve quite a lot of administration for the company, however, but really good point nonetheless, so with you. So thank you very, very much, everyone, for joining into this session. Thank you very much for your questions, your commentary, your involvement. Thank you for those who are watching this live, and for those of you who aren't watching it live, it's been a real pleasure to inform you of everything today. I will now hand over to Paul to say his goodbye. It's goodbye from Paul.
And thank you very much indeed for your comments and your attention. Much appreciated from me. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. And it's been goodbye from me. Thank you very much, everyone. Have a great day. All the best.
Thank you both. Excellent.
Thank you.